Hey there, and welcome to Your Worth Your Way, the podcast that's all about helping you understand that you are worthy of prioritizing your own joy without feeling selfish or guilty. I'm Debbie Lucas, the Joy Alchemist, and each week I'll be bringing you honest, heartfelt conversations with incredible guests, coaches, thought leaders, and soulful humans who'll share their stories and insights on self-worth, confidence, personal growth, and how to create a life that feels authentically yours. This isn't about quick fixes or cookie cutter advice. It's about real talk, practical takeaways, and plenty of soulful inspiration to help you live life your way. So grab your favorite cuppa, get comfy, and let's dive into today's episode. Today, I am joined by the very inspiring Katia Vlachos, a reinvention coach, speaker, meditation teacher, and author of Uncaged, A Good Girl's Journey to Reinvention, a memoir documenting her own journey of self-discovery. Both the memoir and her coaching work revolve around the themes of breaking free from social conditioning and creating a life on your own terms. As a coach, she helps accomplished, ambitious women who haven't yet achieved everything they desire go after what they want in the next chapter of their lives. And we'll be diving into social conditioning and the cages we build around ourselves, the power of looking within, self-awareness, and taking responsibility for our own happiness and choices, reinvention, and how to go about it. So welcome, Katia. It's lovely to have you on the show today.
Thank you, Debbie, for having me. It's a pleasure.
So I've been connected with you for some time now in various shapes and forms over my business and your business journey. So I know a lot about what you do, and I've read Uncaged, which is an incredible book. And thank you so much for sharing your story through that. But give us my listeners, a short introduction to you, who you are, what you do, and what led to the work that you're doing right now.
Well, yeah, we definitely know each other quite well, in different capacity, at least for you. So I'm very excited to be here. Look, besides everything you said, this is, a little background. This is my second career, but it's also, I want to say, my heart career and my purposeful career. Like many of us, I kind of started out doing, following the right path, and what was good for me and prestigious, and would lead to success and accomplishment. So my first career was I started in finance, and I was a military analyst for about a decade. So I policy analyst, researcher. And after 10 years, I realized that wasn't really meaningful for me. I mean, there's a lot more to the story, and you've read the book. But I decided to change everything in my life, not just my career, my personal life, my kind of my identity, go back to what really felt like me and what was really important to me. So here I am. I love what I do. I love watching my clients really take responsibility for their lives, and get out of victimhood, and really take the power back in their hands, and do incredible things. But more important, it's beautiful to watch them really reconnect to what's essential about them, what's really important to them, how they truly are at their core, which is something we forget with time. So going back to that is very powerful, and it's a joy to witness. What else? I absolutely love meditation. Have been doing that for about 7 years now, and I find it has a role to play in reinvention, in creating that space that allows us to reflect on ourselves, our life, our choices, what's true and what isn't ours. So that's also a big part of me. And what else can I say? I've written the first book, which is called The Great Move: Surviving and Thriving in Your Expat Assignment. This is kind of my other life as an expat for 30 years, and it's like the little black book. It's like a manual of how to make international moves, how to go through transitions, how to find home, how to feel at home wherever you are in the world. So Greek by origin. I live in Zurich with my family. Like I said, I've been an expat for 30 years. Have three beautiful children. Well, two of them are adults and one is a teenager. And yeah, that's kind of a bit more background on me.
Yeah, thank you so much. And, again, for the listeners, please go and read Uncaged, because what an incredible life you have lived in terms of the places and the jobs and everything else. And as you say, there was a lot of personal journeys and challenges alongside that as well. And, your work now centers around the cages that we build around ourselves. And, we talk about it in different language, but it really is about those expectations that we put on ourselves, that society, that our families put on ourselves. And so I'd love for you to share like what one of those cages looked like for you, and what helped you to really start dismantling that.
Mm-hmm. So to start with the cages, I mean, this started very early on in my life. I think I entered the cage at the age of 4 or 5, somewhere around there, when we moved from the place where I was born, Cameroon in Africa. We moved to Greece, and then I was raised to be a good Greek girl. So that means following the good path, the right path, excelling, checking all the boxes, very, very important. Pathological people pleasing, as I like to call it, and self-sacrifice, at all costs. So, always putting others' needs ahead of your own. And when I didn't manage to do that perfectly, both because I was still young, but also because there was kind of this side of me that was resisting that, then I was called selfish, and then I felt guilty and ashamed. And so cages, I like to say, is all the ways in which we limit ourselves. And these can be, what we're, the expectations, they can be the roles we take on, the labels like selfish or altruistic or whatever, that keep us kind of, that limit our choices, or that shape our choices. Actually, they limit us from being ourselves, but they shape our choices and they shape our trajectory. So, all these were the bars on my cage, the people pleasing, the self-sacrifice, the pressure to excel, which wasn't even coming from the outside, right? It was coming from me. I was the one putting pressure on myself. The guilt and the shame, all these are they're limitations that we impose on ourselves, and they live up here in our brains. They're not anywhere else, right?
No,
So yeah.
absolutely. Sorry.
But you ask a second, there was a second part of the question, is like, what got me
Yeah.
out of the cage? My God, I was in my early 40s. So when I again, it's a longer story, but there was a turning point where I realized that I didn't like the person I'd become. I didn't even know who I was. It didn't feel like me. And also I had lost agency over my life. I wasn't able to make my own choices, not just, mentally, that, I was making choices for others, but also like concretely in practical terms, I wasn't making important choices. And then I was like, okay, this is enough. I'm terrified of losing myself completely. I have to change things. If that makes sense.
No, no, absolutely. And I think, it's the bit that you said towards the end there about like putting pressure on yourself. And I think, there's the same for me and resonates so much with my journey around people pleasing. A lot of the expectations, and I'm using air quotes for those who are listening on the audio version of this, was my perception of what other people were expecting of me. It wasn't even necessarily them asking overtly for something. For me, my self-worth was tied to being helpful to other people. And so my whole identity was consumed with being helpful. And if I wasn't being helpful, I felt invisible. And I think it's so important for listeners to understand that, what your self-worth and low self-worth can come from so many different angles. And, it's not necessarily one size fits all. And I think that's the bit where, you were speaking about, like, you didn't feel like yourself, that you'd lost agency over your own life. And you talk a lot about responsibility as well. And I think it's so important that, we're able to catch ourselves. And for many of us, and even like for me, it came in my 40s as well. I lived this life of just kind of plodding along, doing what I thought was the right thing to be doing. So when you speak so beautifully around reinvention being a return to your essential self, what does that look like in practice, and how can someone start that journey if they feel completely disconnected from who they really are?
Mhm. So I'll give you a very concrete example that has stayed with me, and it was as I was going through my coaching training, actually like the first module of my coaching training, we had this exercise where people would, it was about noticing, realizing the impact we have on other people. And here I was with, in a room full of, I don't know, there were like 15 other people I never met in my life and hadn't met me, didn't know what I was like, after maybe a day of doing like exercises together. And we had to go around the room and they had to give, their like how they saw me, like they had to give adjectives for how they saw me and what they wanted to see more. And what, one of the things that came out is like, we see that there's playfulness in you. We see like the rebellious side, the cheeky side, and we'd like to see more of that. And I was like, what? Like, how can you see that? Because it made me think. And they're like, yeah, we want to see the 4-year-old in you. And that was stunning because I stopped being playful at 4. When I moved, when I was separated from my father, when I realized I had to be responsible and I had to be good, right? So that I didn't want to bother anyone. Again, long story, had to do with my father, but the playfulness kind of left me at that point, but it was always there, and somebody saw it, which was mind blowing for me at the time, but also it gave me, permission in a way to bring that back and to reconnect with that part of me that was very essential, but that I wasn't acknowledging because it wasn't, I don't even know if it was acceptable or not, but I didn't think it was acceptable. And I definitely didn't think it belonged in my work. Right. So it's, it's connecting, like we don't own all the parts of ourselves. There's certain parts that we decide to leave behind or to hide or to neglect or because they're not convenient, because they're not appropriate, because we just they just stay back and we forget about them. So what I find that in reinvention, we have permission to find all those parts of us that are back there somewhere or below the layers, like we say, huh? And integrate them into who we're becoming. But they're really there. So integrate them. It's just like making them shine more, be more intentional about having them be part of us. So it's not okay, how was I when I was 4? I want to be exactly the same. It's more like what was important to me then
Mhm.
that I want to take with me or bring back.
That's such a beautiful kind of journey that you took us on there, and actually the podcast interview literally before this one, we spoke a lot about inner child work and inner child healing, and like your letter in the book to your, oh, I can feel myself tearing up because it's quite emotional when I read it. It's such a beautiful exercise to do for anybody, is to write that to your little girl, to the little girl inside, and what was important, and given that permission to say that as an adult, like, it's okay, I've got this now. Because I know my 6-year-old, when I work with my inner child, it's a 6-year-old me, and she's very stubborn and very stroppy and really kind of called the shots for a long time. But as you say, it's about the parts, and it's not about, as you say, I do actually use the term integrating, but you've kind of shown me a different perspective on that. It's not integrating because it's already part of you, but it's about shining the light, about acknowledging. For me, if it's about acknowledging the purpose that it served throughout your life. And as you so beautifully wrote in your letter to your inner child, was, it's okay now, you can kind of rest easy because I'm okay, and I'll take that on. And I think, you spoke a lot there about, like, when you were 4 and becoming the good girl, and kind of like the expectations that, and the external validation you attach to those expectations. And that's really the crux of self-worth, isn't it? It's about, how you learn to be worthy in the world, very much tied to that external validation. And I think a lot of what you talk about in terms of, the cages and breaking them down, is about how you build that self-worth from within, how you empower yourself from within, because nobody can ever take that away from you. You know, people can behave and act in certain ways or say certain things, but if your worth is anchored within yourself, it doesn't, it's unshakable. So how would you, or how do you support your clients to redefine self-worth from the inside out?
Mm-hmm. So there's a very interesting concept I use that I learned from my meditation teacher. His name is David G, and he's a very, very wise man. So he talks about something called the winning formula. And the winning formula we learn early on, it is everything we think we need to do or be in order to get what we need. And what do we need? Attention, appreciation, acknowledgement, even love, right? And this is, this is the beginning of starting to draw our validation from the outside. So for some people, like, for me, it was being excellent, and being good at everything. That was my way of getting all that attention and appreciation and the validation. For others, it's something else. And so this winning formula accompanies us through our life, and it becomes a pattern of thinking, of behaving, of ways of seeing the world, until it stops working, until we hit the wall, just like I did, like many people do, right? And that's when, if we are able to look within and understand what's going on, or have the right support or whatever, that's when we decide, okay, this is not working for me anymore. I need a new winning formula. And that new winning formula has more to do with deriving the validation from within, right? From feeling grounded in that, because we cannot influence what we get from the outside. We cannot control that. We can maybe influence, but we can't control that. So it's kind of a losing game. Whereas when we're more rooted into what makes us, what's important to us, our values, our sense of purpose, a sense of contribution, these are all things I work on with my clients, right? Then we become so much more solid. And so if we get validation, it's nice to have, right? I'm not saying don't
Yeah.
take compliments, or, avoid any kind of recognition. Absolutely not. It's great to have, but we don't become addicted to it, right? We don't need it to feel ourselves. We don't need it to make decisions. Same with the negative validation. It doesn't shake us as much, because we know ourselves. We know what we're doing. We know how we're showing up. We know the value we bring to the world. And so really kind of getting clear on all of that internal grounding is, I think, the best antidote to this dependence on external validation. This is something I come across all the time with so many of my clients. I mean, it's how we're raised, right? It's how we survive. We have to take our cues from the outside when we're young, because we have to belong, and really, like, get all these things that I talked about to survive. So it's very, very common, but it's, at some point, it stops serving us.
Absolutely. And there's a couple of things that you were talking about there. And one of the things that was jumping out to me at first was, that whole concept of self-worth. And did you find this for yourself, and do you find it with your clients? Because I know certainly it was part of my journey, was that, when I started on this journey, I remember the first coach that I worked with, she asked me, like, what is it that you want from life or desire? What are your dreams? And I genuinely couldn't answer that question. And if I did try and answer it, it was all linked to things for other people. As I said, like my worth was how helpful or useful I was to other people. And it took me such a long time to really kind of, deep down, once I kind of opened up a bit, I realized that freedom was important to me, and then what that looked like for me, and not being tied down. And I think, do you find that did you find that for yourself? Do you find that for your clients, that at the start of these journeys, you struggle to even know what that looks like for yourself?
Mm-hmm. Did anyone ever ask you that earlier in life? Like when you were a kid, did anyone ever ask you what's important? Like, what do you want?
Yeah.
Like, what do you really want?
No.
It's the toughest question. We ask that all the time in coaching, as you know, right? Because it's the toughest question. No one asked me either. We don't get asked that. We don't practice thinking about that. We don't practice connecting to ourselves and what's important to us. And so the first time, we are kind of able to make our own choices and choose directions, we're out of practice. So yes, of course, I had the same thing, right? And how do you get out of it? How do you move towards making your own choices? One tiny step at a time. Maybe it's deciding where you want to go on vacation, or something small, like which book you're going to read next. It's practicing making our own choices, not which book I should read, or which vacation places are the safest or child friendly or whatever. You know what I mean? Like without the external input, like really trying to make the small choices for ourselves, and then we get to the bigger questions, right? And so that's one way to do it. The other one is just to allow ourselves to dream and reconnect with the ability to dream, which is also part of our little one, right? uh Again, that's kind of taken out of us, or put to sleep for a long, long time, this ability to dream, replaced by feasibility and realism and hard work and I don't know what. But so giving ourselves permission to just sit there and dream about what would be ideal for me right now, like if there were no obstacles. That I think is another way to kind of brainstorm and let our imagination, and we will get there, but it's a process getting to what you really, really want. um Last part is, it really helps, I think, what you talked about, what's important to me. Freedom is a value, so exploring your values, I think, is a very good foundation for this kind of reflection, right? To find out what matters and where you want to go, what the vision is, all that, grand stuff.
Yeah, yeah. I love that, because like bringing the imagination part and the dreaming part and just being playful with it, you were speaking earlier for yourself, like the cheeky, playful side. And, like I'm all about joy in what I do, and joy is how I've now started creating my life. And I think, like when I first started dreaming, when I first started kind of like really kind of like letting my mind explore what was important to me, what I would want from life, that the guilt and the being called selfish bit that you spoke about earlier, that was like, it was like the heaviest cloud sitting over my head. And I think what I've learned for myself, and what I now, when I'm coaching other women, is that people who call you selfish, people who react to you kind of setting boundaries or kind of going for what it is you dream and desire of, they're the ones who benefited from you not having the boundaries, from not, from
Exactly.
always kind of meeting their needs. And that taps into the bit that you've spoken about, you speak about in the book, and you've spoken about earlier, was that responsibility for yourself.
Mhm.
Acknowledging when you're triggered, because if somebody else puts a boundary in place, you're kind of like, whoa, they're being selfish. Actually, no, it's a mirror, and it's about what's going on in your own internal world. So what ways do you support your clients to kind of take radical responsibility for themselves?
Mhm. So I think a lot of them, by the time they come to me, they're ready to take responsibility. They've tried all the other paths,
Mhm.
listened to the podcast, read the books, taken the courses, whatever, right? And it hasn't really helped them move forward. So I think they're kind of, okay, that's it. I'm ready. I am taking charge. So I don't think I have to, like, I can't think of anyone who has come to me and is still kind of in the victim
Yeah.
mindset, which I was in for several
Mhm,
years, right?
mhm.
Things are happening to me. I have no power. I'm resentful. I mean, it's kind of a nasty place to be, but uh, it happens, right? And
Mhm, mhm.
and the sooner we notice, the sooner we get out of it, the faster we can move on with our lives. So I think it's more learning to manage the guilt. Guilt is a big topic, especially
Mhm.
for women, right? When I make all these changes, what happens to the people in my life? Am I harming someone? Are people going to react and resist and get triggered? And so, how am I going to manage that? So, it's a bit about normalizing what's going to happen, expecting, anticipating, and understanding what why people get triggered. You said it. I totally believe, being called selfish or whatever we're called is a control mechanism, because being selfless works for, you know, everybody else except for us. So of course people will get triggered. So understanding that when they get triggered, it's really not about you, it's more about them and how comfortable they were with you just giving everything. And normalizing also the fact that, your social circle may rearrange itself. Some people are not going to like what's happening, and that's okay, but there will be new people who are going to be part of your life, who are going to want to be with the person you are becoming, who are okay with the boundaries, who are there to nurture you and lift you up and support you. So I think it kind of helps calm down a little bit the fear and the guilt around these decisions. That's more the direction we're taking it, rather than taking responsibility. I think a lot of my clients are the other extreme of responsibility, like again, like similar to my story, we take too much responsibility for everything and everyone's happiness and needs and all that. So it's also a bit rearranging the priorities and then putting ourselves a little higher on the, or ideally at the top of the priority list, right? So yeah, maybe taking responsibility for prioritizing ourselves. That's that's something we definitely work on, and it's a practice as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, one of the things that I talk about a lot and that you talk about as well is, like, yes, reinvention or whatever, whatever coach you're working with, whatever they call their version of that, it sounds very empowering, but it can also feel really overwhelming when you're starting on this journey. And I've had this conversation with so many guests on this podcast where, we're sitting here saying, look at this amazing life that we've created, but first of all, we're still on that journey, we're still dealing with our triggers and all these feelings of guilt that still crop up time and time again. But the second part is that this wasn't an overnight thing. We didn't just wake up one morning and go, right, this is my life, it's going to be different. It's been a series of events and realizations, and yeah, they kind of grow exponentially as time goes on. It's not about those dramatic leaps, and it might seem like a dramatic leap. So for example, like, I resigned from my day job at the start of the year, and I'm now going, full on in my business. That's what freedom looks like and feels like for me. That doesn't mean everybody needs to go and quit their jobs. It's about, as you said before, those small little changes that you can make throughout your day, throughout your life, and that gradually grows as you gain confidence in yourself, trusting your intuition. So how how did you, right, sorry, I'm just trying to reframe this question. One of the things that I always talk about is, like, you're not starting over, you're starting from where you're at, and you bring the knowledge and the wisdom and the experience with you. And I think your book so beautifully shows that journey of how you went from that, you could feel the powerlessness and that victim mode, not that you described it as that, but you could feel that, like, this is being done unto me, I don't feel like I have a choice. You just kind of felt like you had to go along with it. And then you can see that shift happen over time, where you do kind of start making those decisions. And I think the coaching training that you did and something that I did, that was like a big catalyst for me as well. There's something that happens that you're either moving towards what you would like, or you're moving away from. And I always like to kind of work towards moving towards, because that's like the good stuff, where you focus on the negative that you want to move away from, kind of anchors you, keeps pulling you back into that mindset. So how can women begin to shift their lives without needing to make any dramatic leaps, like leave a spouse, move country, leave their job? Like, what are ways that you've helped other women to just kind of take more agency of their life?
Yeah, so it's really what you're saying, and this idea that you have to do a dramatic change is one of the myths that often hold people back, because they think they have to burn down their life and start over, and that makes reinvention very scary. Like, right? It's a scary word, and people keep postponing or finding reasons why they're not ready. So I try to talk as much as I can about that, because it didn't happen for me. I didn't have one big dramatic decision, right? That, like, at the beginning, of course, there were, bold or dramatic decisions along the way. I mean, I did decide to leave my marriage. It's a big one.
Mm-hmm.
Or change careers. That's a big one as well. But these things didn't happen out of the blue. I had been practicing, like I said, small decisions that allowed me to gain confidence, allowed me to build momentum, to know that I was on the right path, that I could do it, that had what it takes. Because when you start making decisions, like there's a lot of insecurity. If I think back again, like, can I make this decision by myself? I wasn't making decisions before. I was avoiding, I hated making decisions because I didn't like, I wasn't clear on what's important to me. I wasn't clear on my values. I had never articulated them. So every decision, like, does it feel right? I don't know. Did I, it was no check for me.
Mhm.
Um, and that made all the difference once I had realized, okay, these things are important to me. Then decisions became much easier because they just felt right because they were aligned with what
Yeah.
matters, right? So I let others make decisions. So once you start, it's kind of, oh, okay, am I doing the right thing? Who knows? Let me try and see what happens. That's why it's important to start with the little things that are, kind of low stakes
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
decisions. Um, but they are changes, they are little boundaries we set, even if it's just, something you've been saying yes, but don't really feel like doing, and you suddenly decide to say no
Yeah.
and not excuse yourself 15 times. Okay, maybe the first time you excuse yourself a couple
Yeah.
of times.
Yeah.
Over time, not excuse yourself at all, and actually feel good and feel relieved.
Mhm.
And that shows you, okay, you know what, this is, this boundary worked out for me. I can maybe, go for a bigger one now. And this kind of energy vampire of a friend I have, maybe now I just, like, I don't go see them, out of obligation.
Yeah.
Bigger decision, maybe I decide to kind of slowly move away from that
Mhm.
person who's draining me, or the toxic person at work that that's kind of undermining me constantly. Maybe I decide to set a boundary there. So the boundaries can get progressively bigger, the decisions, the choices, they can get more important over time. But it's really, it's just like, I like to say, just like the caging process is gradual and we don't
Mhm.
realize what's happening until we're in the cage.
Yeah.
The uncaging, the boundary setting, the choices, it's also a very gradual process. And these small shifts, they build up, and then you get the big transformation at the end. But it's, yeah. And I don't know what you said about, like, I don't know what you mean, like we're still on our journey. I'm like perfectly there. I'm done, right? Just kidding. Just kidding. That's the beauty of life, right? That you're always
Absolutely.
growing and evolving, and there's always new frontiers and always new triggers, and it just keeps life interesting.
Absolutely. And I think, it's like there's a lot of talk in the kind of spiritual and healing world around, like, you can't appreciate and experience the light for what it is unless you have the shadows,
Mm,
because if you always just lived in light, if we grow up and everything was always fine, you would kind of almost, I would imagine, feel quite like, is this just life? Groundhog Day? Everything's just good.
boring.
But actually, when you're faced with some of those shadows and some of those deeper triggers, it helps you to then appreciate the good stuff. And as you say, that becomes more and more, the more you practice it, the bolder you become in asserting yourself and knowing what it is that you desire. And I think for me, what one of the big shifts was around prioritizing my joy, and that's what this podcast is all about. And like, it's become my frequency. And every decision I make now is like, what would the version of me that chooses joy over obligation choose? And
Mm,
so far, it's served me well. Yeah, there's been friendships that have fallen away, like you say. Like, there's been some friendships that have just been so draining on my energy and my bandwidth that I've kind of gradually just distanced myself. But what I've realized that is, as you said, like, as you energetically align with who you are truly and what your values are, some people will naturally fall away, and it's about being okay with that. That you're
mhm.
not responsible for keeping everybody happy and maintaining friendships. And it's about aligning yourself and surrounding yourself with the people who do support you and keep your vibration high, and having conversations like this is why I created this podcast, because it keeps my vibe so high. So
Yeah, I can see that. Yes.
one of my final questions to you is that, obviously joy is a big focus of this podcast. So how do you prioritize joy in your own life? And what advice would you give to somebody who struggles to do that for themselves?
So, yeah. Okay. So, besides going through the longer process of analyzing why is it so hard to prioritize ourselves, what is the story behind that? What are we telling ourselves? Again, a lot of it around, selfish and being selfish to do that, and what that does to other people. It's a lot around questioning the stories and assumptions we make behind the idea of prioritizing ourselves. And okay, it doesn't actually have to be a long process. Just asking the questions makes you realize, okay, is this my story? Like me taking a half hour to go walk instead of, cook an elaborate meal for my family, is this going to really damage them? If I'm around and feel very high vibe and positive, and I'm a wonderful person to be around because of that half hour, is that going to damage them? So it's logical. It's logical, like questioning these assumptions and realizing this is just stuff we've been told, and it doesn't make any sense for us. Definitely doesn't make sense right now. So asking, getting curious. Actually, I don't want to say challenge. I don't want to
Mhm,
like be in a
mhm.
fighting mode, but more
Yeah.
getting curious. Okay, what is it that's stopping me right now? And again, like you said, we're not perfect, so I will sometimes do that for myself, and sometimes be like, no, 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 I need to finish this email, or I need to, this whatever newsletter, or whatever that is. And no, I can't, leave my desk right now. But I try to catch myself when that happens and be like, okay, am I, what if I took these 15 minutes or half an hour or an hour for myself and came back and did this in half the time, because I have more energy, and then I have, I don't know, more time to play with my dog or whatever. So one thing is questioning and getting curious, and the other thing is knowing what it is that recharges you, and knowing when you start to feel depleted of joy as well, right? Not just energy, joy. I find those two are very, very connected, and knowing what it is that will bring you that. So, little things for me. It's playing with my puppy, who's almost not a puppy anymore, but brings me joy, like immense joy. Cooking with my daughter, who's now, back from just graduated from university, and she's home, and we're cooking, and or sharing a meal with my family, or anything that has to do with movement, going for a walk, going to the gym, going to my yoga class. That brings me joy, like for so many reasons, right? So um, I know what that is, and I know what I need. Maybe it's taking 10 minutes to meditate if I didn't manage to do it in the morning. And that's gonna, bring me peace and grounding, but also joy, because I made the space for myself. Right. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your
Oh no,
question.
that was amazing. Thank you. And I think a couple of things that jumped out for me there was like, first of all, awareness, and that is you like, taking, like, really being fully aware of yourself, your body, and your energy levels, and your the emotions and things that are coming around. And like, one of the things when you were talking there that I've never quite made the connection with it, joy linked to energy, because when you're low energy, it's going to be really hard to feel happy and joyful, and it's about
Mm,
changing your state. It's about either resting or doing the movement, and just kind of reinvigorating yourself, because then, like, if you've been for a walk and you come back, even if it's been 10 minutes, your mood's instantly lifted. And I know people talk
100%.
about that, they've been talking about it forever, but it's hard to have one without the other. So taking the time
Mhm.
out to recalibrate and to kind of just, reset yourself is so important as well. So thank you for sharing that.
Well, my pleasure. And I think it's hard to feel joy, like you said, when you're surviving. When you're surviving, you're busy surviving.
Yeah.
You're doing the basics. And I don't think joy is part of the basic
No,
survival,
no,
kit. So we need to
absolutely.
move to a different state, different level to
Yeah.
be able to experience joy.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
absolutely. And, thank you so much for sharing all your stories and insights, Katia. It's been a wonderful conversation. And I think, one of there's so many things that stood out for me, but one of the things that really kind of stuck with me was that winning formula of, like, who do I need to be, or what do I need to do to get what I want or need out of life? And I think, it's about that. That's where the stepping into your future version of yourself kind of comes in as well, isn't it? It's like, well, what would that future version of myself be doing? They wouldn't be accepting, the friend who's constantly, on the phone draining your energy. They wouldn't accept whatever it is. And so it's about kind of recalibrating yourself and showing up as that version of yourself now. So that was really helpful.
Mm. Yeah, it's a beautiful exercise connecting to like you're thinking about your future version. I love that. That's one of my
Yeah.
favorites.
And I'm sure that my listeners will want to find out more about you, your book, and what you do. So tell us where you hang out and where they can connect with you.
So best place, my website, katiavlachos.com. LinkedIn is my main platform, but I'm also active on Instagram, katia.vlachos, or LinkedIn with my name. And yeah, I think that's about it. And my meditation teacher, winning formula person is David G, one word, David J.I. And he's incredible. And I highly recommend people follow him.
Brilliant. I'll add all the links to that in the show notes as well, so people can easily access that. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
This has been an amazing conversation. It's been so lovely to connect with you again.
It's been a delight. And thank you for having me and for asking such beautiful, thoughtful questions and for the work you do, Debbie.
You're very welcome. Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Your Worth, Your Way. I know that you'll be walking away feeling inspired and ready to embrace your worth and prioritize your joy. And if you love this episode, I'd be so grateful if you could leave a review or share it with someone who needs a little bit of encouragement today. And don't forget to hit that follow button so you never miss another episode. And you can connect with me, find out more about the podcast, my guests, and what I do at debbielucas.me/links. And if you don't already, follow me on your favorite social media platform. I'd love to hear your thoughts and continue the conversation there. And until next time, remember that you are worthy exactly as you are.